point of what Hunter is experiencing, what we're talking about, what Casey is having success doing, what we're going to want to do is create the course content that does some of the heavy lifting that we would otherwise find ourselves doing in these sessions, right? So I wanted to just give you guys some quick directions on how I would do this. If I had to start again, this is what I would do at this point in time. I know I've mentioned a couple of times, the organizing question here really is, what do my clients need to know about or understand in order to make my coaching that much more effective? So what I see a lot of people start thinking about is like, I need to build this course. I think some of the words, in fact, Casey, you said in the context of creating content that you have to weave this tapestry, right? You said something to that effect last week. You're going to have an easier time weaving that tapestry with some dots to connect in the past rather than weaving forward, if you will. So again and again, how do we create content that simply answers this question, which is, what do my clients need to know in order to make my coaching that much more effective? So why is this important? Scaling is one reason why, but also if we're losing a lot of time in our coaching sessions explaining concepts that could be delivered in another format, that time is being subtracted, or that time spent explaining those concepts takes away from your ability to make high impact, high leverage transformation occur in your sessions. So if we're spending all of our time explaining content, we are therefore not able to work on deepening their commitment, developing that visceral insight, and really honing in on what the underlying barriers are for them, and or confronting the things that are really holding them back.
Can I? Okay, this is my first time talking in the middle of a presentation of Christine's. Yeah, that the thing that sprang to mind is was reshaping the language. There was this really clicked for me, so I was hoping it would click for other people. Um, Teaching isn't coaching, and if we're taking the time in the coaching session to teach, we're missing we're missing out on that opportunity there.
Exactly. And it's keeping us, by definition, kind of in a lower leverage state for us and for them. So week 2, I had you guys do 2 targets. One was use Parkinson's law to devote 15 minutes of your time to reviewing your journals, notes, etc., and start digesting some of that complexity that you found in your likely very large and elaborate nest of resources that you're sitting on. And from that list, and then obviously anything else that emerged, stray thoughts as a result of reviewing that, creating a list of potential topics. These can be insights that you want to really explore and extrapolate, interest areas that could be potentially developed as part of your program. So this was in week 2. This is really all you need to get started. And I wanted to show you the literal notes from my first stab at this, because I think it's really important to not overcomplicate this to the extent as possible. You know, we want to make sure that we are delivering potency, and that will get lost if we create a really complicated and elaborate process around this to start. So this is from my Remarkable. Can you see my cursor moving around here?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So create a list of topics you need to need to be covered at some point, right? So here in my disorganized mind, this section is that list. Also, I picked it up down over here, apparently. start determining a logical order, right? So I was looking to organize about 8 weeks. Thinking about in what order does it make the most sense to touch on these topics, right? And as I went, I definitely erased, moved down, moved back, sort of like Tetris-ish. But it was not a fully the way I did that was as a result of data I started to get within the group. So you aren't going to be able to cover everything in that initial 2 to 4 weeks. Obviously, this is like just going to be scratching the surface. So we have to be okay with that. So keeping this list running and dropping in, oh, I think we need to cover intuition and decision making at some point, dropping it in. Fear. This is obviously a huge topic, right? In your brain, fear and its importance and relevancy is going to be really different across whether we're talking about how Casey thinks about fear and why it's important for his people, how Beth thinks about fear and why she thinks it's important for her people. That's all going to be really different, right? We're not just giving the ChatGPT summary of fear, in other words. What in the context of your offering is important for people to know about, for example, fear? And in what week should I present that? Again, really just planning out those 2 to 4 weeks is more than well, I wouldn't say more than enough, but that is where you're going to want to shoot to start the program. Because once you're in it, you're going to start to get a lot of data very quickly that's going to morph all of the following weeks in ways that you can't really anticipate. So once you have this general outline, this is, again, how I would approach trying to do this. Creating a script of your thoughts and including any expert opinions that you want to weave in. I do this in my notes app. I know that's like wicked simple, but it works. You can also get help with AI, or not with AI, using AI. It can help you develop this script, but be sure that you go through and remove the BS stuff that kind of filters in there. And you need to be really disciplined at injecting the distinctions that only you could make into the script that AI gives you. Which is, it sounds difficult. It's kind of one of these things where I don't know if you guys have had this experience. I know Hunter has. He was avoiding the Google Drive and the offer document, and then, he went in there one day and it was like not as hard as it was. It was the hardest part was just getting in there and opening the thing, right? It's kind of similar with this idea of editing AI stuff. Sounds like a real pain, kind of difficult. But if you put it in a Word document and you just start going through it, you're going to see very quickly, oh, that's junk, delete that. Oh, this would actually be way more useful to like frame this way, right? So a lot of the difficulty is mostly a mental fabrication. It's relatively simple to do this. Once you have your script, this is what I would do at this point in time, create the Gamma presentation. All I have done, Casey had a really nice help me fine tune my first presentation. I just dumped my scripts into Gamma and edit it that way. It gives me really good work, and I do have to edit it, but for like 20 minutes versus 4 hours is what I probably would have spent creating the thing, if not more, without Gamma's help. If you're really unsure, i.e. having just the stuff on the slides feels like not enough information for you to be able to present effectively, In the upper right corner of each slide that you make in Gamma, there's an add notes function. So you can put in, all the other things that you want to talk about that may not be included on the slide. And that will show up when you go into presentation mode if you have those notes loaded in. So in other words, it will display for your viewers the slides, but on your screen, you'll see also the notes associated with the slides. You can now just film this using the screen share function on Zoom and whatever screen recording function you have on your computer. This is probably the simplest way. So at this point, you've completed your outline. You've made a script for the module. You filmed it. Oh, well, skipped a step. You created your Gamma and you filmed it, right? And you put that into your community. All you really need at this point is just, if you feel like it would be useful, any supplementary resources you want to link to or include in that module. So this can be, you can link to philosophers' notes, any TED Talks that you think are really hard hitting that you want them to watch. You can also create your PDFs, worksheets, mind maps also could be useful. I haven't used it a ton, but Miro is a good application if you like mind maps and you think your people will like mind maps. These are just resources that you suspect will help them deepen their integration of whatever it is you just said in that presentation. That's the only frame. So again, this isn't really to create busy work, right? These are the things that you believe, you hypothesize your clients need to be doing, coming in contact with in order to make the changes that you're seeking in that given module more concrete and more durable. Durable meaning long lasting, resilient to deterioration and sort of forgetting about it, losing momentum. Once you have those, simply upload them to whatever community hosting site you're using. In my case, it's Mighty Networks. All that being said, I want to point out, if you want to see my first dive into this, look at the Quantum Leap Psychology course, where I did not do any of the stuff I just talked about. I didn't know about Gamma, and I just used my iPhone and a backdrop to film. And that worked too, because the frame I was using, again, was what do they need to know to make the coaching more effective, right? You can obviously fine tune and make things less raw over time. But what you really have to focus on at first is that organizing question of what do they need to know about? What are the things that I would otherwise be explaining for extended periods of time? How can I put that into a module? If you like the filming yourself backdrop approach, use, I'm gonna send you guys this link for an app for iPhone, which worked really well for me. I tried a lot of them. So it's worth just having in case you guys decide to go this approach of just filming yourself reading the script with a backdrop of some kind. So over time, what you're going to see and feel to a certain extent is you're getting a little bit lost, right? Coming back again and again to what they need to know to make your coaching more effective. This could be considered a mantra. You'll also, because each of you are very curious people, you're going to be managing a level of inspiration overload, right? So you're going to feel yourself getting pulled in different directions because of this inspiration over time. So keep adding those topics to your master list and dropping them in to the weeks when it makes sense. It's okay, and it's to be expected that you will be having that inspiration overload. So the algorithm really is record it for future use, don't fixate on it, and move on. Trusting yourself and doing the things that you know you need to do to earn that trust to come back to your list is really important. Having these sort of simple procedures, creating this master list, having a routine of dropping in these ideas, insights, areas of focus as you go about creating and building out your courses is a really simple way to avoid losing your center on this. It's really important to know that at this point, you don't have enough information to need to go beyond creating more than a few weeks. What you also need to know is that data is going to come in quickly about what you need to do next once you get in there. So just to kind of really emphasize that point, once you have participants who are resonating, your problem is going to become not like grasping for what do they need to know. You're going to be struggling to keep up with all the things that you can now see that they need, right? So that's your next bigger and more interesting problem once you kind of transcend this initial phase of taking that stab of 2 to 4 weeks and getting the data that arises for your participants. Does that make sense?
Can you repeat that one for the evolution?
Yeah. So where you're at right now is sort of grasping. I'm not totally sure what they need to know and in what order in these initial few weeks. You know, it sort of feels like moving around in a dark room. Once you get through those 2 to 4 weeks, the lights are going to turn on and you're going to be like, oh crap, they need this, right? So it's a very different problem that's going to start making its way into your life once you have the data coming in and you see how people are responding. Does that make more sense? So that'll be fun. Does anybody have any other questions about this?
What would you say? I'm immediately imagining that it, especially consistent with all the work that we've done and our kind of our focus, that there's like a physiological sensation that I would have, like coming to the end of the 2 to 4 weeks, that I'd get that like my heart rate would go up with a little inspiration energy thing that I get. And I'm like, oh, I'm a hunger. I'm like, oh, yeah, I really want to work on this and this and this because those are the things that I feel like would naturally connect. I'm not necessarily seeing they need this and this and this, but I feel like that's the natural extension is like, I now really want to produce this and produce this and produce this because it feels like that's the jump, the leap that's coming out of the 2 to 4 weeks. Does that sound like it's in the ballpark of how that would kind of proceed?
Yeah, I mean, even in your first week, you're going to say, oh, you know what my 5th week needs to be about. And you're going to put that in and start kind of building that out. You're going to get into your 2nd week and you'll be like, oh, now I know what my 6th week needs to be. Um, so I don't think you need to wait until the end of those 2 to 4 weeks. I would be building with your group. And that's why I think having a relatively simple way to do this is important, which is having that list, creating your script, putting it into Gamma, doing the fine tuning you need to, make it your own so that you have the distinctions in there that it can't make for you, filming it, and then getting it into your community. right? You don't want to be agonizing for 8 hours a week trying to create these things, right? Overall, what we're trying to do is really operationalize this pattern, and you hopefully are seeing it across different areas. This is similar to connection to purpose, right? So we get the insight, we document. Most people miss the documenting stage, and then they can't figure out why there's no action. It's because it was never documented, so it never gets a chance to come into reality. So as you're getting insight about what the group needs, content coursework wise, having a place where you have that, and you saw my little very simple recording process. It doesn't have to be elaborate, but you have to have the practice of, oh, okay, week 6 is definitely going to have to include this. Or at least I know that in the coming X number of weeks, we're going to have to talk about this, so it goes on my master list. Does that make sense? We want to be totally in flow with this, so it doesn't feel as hard as it otherwise will be. So having those mechanisms, again, around insight, document, action. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I think it was something that I noted too, was that I just have to write that stuff down. It doesn't necessarily need to be acted upon later. That is for later discernment, a later judgment, but I have to note it. When I feel that moment of inspiration, it's likely my intuition making a connection there, a subconscious thing that's like, hey, your people could use this, or this is a maybe sometimes it's, a quantum leap is not a logical connection that you can see in advance. If you could see it logically in advance, you could systematically produce those results and produce that sequence. The whole point is that it's the irrational jump, right?
Yes.
And so making note of it when it doesn't make sense is more valuable than like trying to sit there and like map the whole thing out. Just take those notes, log the stuff, reassess it later, and then see where it might fit in.
Yeah. And one thing to really think about, the limitations of your working memory. Your working memory can only effectively really hold on to like 7 things at any given time. So
On a good day.
yeah. So having the humility to know that there's nothing wrong with you, that's where your limitation is. That's just, for I'm trying to remember what the exact metaphor is, but it's like for the time that human beings are on this planet, if you were to put that into 24 hours a day, 24-hour span, it's only been in like the last 60 seconds of that day that we've needed any of the skills that we're talking about, right? Our brains are evolved for very different conditions than what we're asking it to do today. So being really wise about that, knowing that you can't, by definition, keep all of this stuff in your head and make meaningful progress.